Welcome to Dads with Nerdy Ambitions, your go-to podcast for nerd culture and pop culture in the 21st century. I'm your host, Steve Pugh. And joined with me tonight is my wonderful, amazing co-host, David Perry. David, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here, good sir.
Thanks again for having me.
Oh, yeah. So this is kind of an episode that I've been wanting to do, and you actually are the one that kicked me in the butt for this episode to get it going. I don't know if anybody knows this, but I'm a casual painter, and I've done a little bit of painting, and I did some for David, and that you took those miniatures and you took them to play D&D. So
yes,
that went over pretty well, right?
Yeah, they look fabulous because not only did you just paint them, but you added some effects to the base and some grass and some other things, and just I don't art, right? So I don't. I've never been very artistic, and so my friends who were over, we're used to the minis that you buy out of the box, and you either buy the unpainted ones from Reaper or some of the nozzles. Is that what they are?
Yeah.
Anyway, either the Pathfinder miniatures, the pre-primed Pathfinder miniatures, or the pre-primed D&D miniatures. And then you can paint those yourself. Those are the ones I sent you.
Yeah.
And the ones that you buy are just lousy. I mean, probably because they're done in a mass market way. But they looked fabulous. I put them on the table and people were like, ooh, and they just look so much better on the battle map than the stock ones. And of course, then their next question was, I wonder if he'll paint some for us. And I said, well, if you throw enough money at him, he probably will. So
I will definitely paint some minis for them. I love painting them. I do. But I do it for that reason. I love that reaction. And that's when people are like, oh my God, that's cool. How did you do that? And that's what some of your friends were asking, because somebody is a potential painter or something of that sort. And had some...
one of the couples that play with at our table, their daughter she's 14. She just started high school.
Okay.
And she's very artsy.
Yeah.
And so she's a dancer, and she does, I think she's dabbling in trying to find out what it is that she likes or what is it that she wants to do. And so she was looking at them where I look at art and I appreciate whether it looks good or whether it doesn't look good. She was looking at it with the more technical aspects of it in mind.
I love that.
Right. Well, and that's above me too. I mean, my wife is my wife is a better artist than she will ever give herself credit for. But we go to art, when we go to art museums, we went to Russia a few years ago, and at the Hermitage there in St. Petersburg, they have The Prodigal Son by Rembrandt. Which is just this fabulous painting.
Yeah.
But all of that is lost on me, because my view of art is, well, I've seen The Prodigal Son in a book, and of course, right, exactly, and I get this. This is a me problem. This is a deficiency with me, right? Because I'm like,
you uncultured swine.
Yes, exactly. There's the prodigal son, and then there's the father and the older brother behind him, and all that. And my wife, of course, I am convinced that this painting is 40% of the reason why she wanted to go on this trip.
Okay.
Just to go to the Hermitage in St. Petersburg and all that. Now, we also did several other stops along the way, which were very interesting. But that's the extent of how much I enjoy art. But I do appreciate art that's done well, because I can't do it. I mean, that's not a talent I've ever had. I mean, I've done a little bit of painting, but like I paint my armor, but part of that is also I intentionally do a lousy job of painting my armor.
Then it's battle damaged.
Right. Well, my character is a Mandalorian and a bounty hunter, not an artist. My character is not Sabine, right? From Rebels.
I love it.
So, but anyway, but I do appreciate that. So you were talking about, do you consider yourself an amateur painter?
So here's my definition. Do I
technically
consider
you're a professional?
Technically, I so on paper, yes, I am a professional painter.
Okay.
Because I had been paid multiple times in various amounts. That I don't want to get into how much some of them have been paid because it was awesome. But
it's probably not what you're actually what your hourly rate actually is.
No, what my rate should have been is not nearly what I had them pay me. But it's yes, technically I was. I don't consider myself a professional anymore because I really don't do it as on a commission base anymore. However, I do it for friends and family because of your reaction and your friends' reactions. And if I do get that wild hair where I need to, I have tons of minis. I paint them up, and if I don't want them, right here, I'll give a great shout out to my friendly local gaming store, the Raven's Nest. I put them up there, and if they sell, they sell. If they don't, they collect dust. And at by point, I go, okay, it's been a year. Let's give them off as raffle gifts. That's legitimately because I can't, in my basement, I can't keep them. But yes, and I have actually been on other podcasts giving techniques and how to do painting, and it seems inappropriate that I've done a painting episode on multiple other podcasts, but not my own.
Not your own.
No. But
so
like,
do you paint in any other medium or just miniatures?
I do
on canvas, or
I do canvas. I actually do spray paint. I do do a lot of spray painting art. I'll pull something real quick. So I do a lot of these. So this is right here is one thing I just actually did, and it doesn't look that great right now. Now, I obviously the listeners can't see, but it's a fluorescent planet or star. Honestly, I don't know. Circular shape. When there's celestial, there's like shading behind it. There's a little bit of galaxy, and lots of stars. But the reason I did it like this is so when I put it on a black light, it looks totally boss. Like you get to see a lot more in depth. So like see how the details start to show up. Yeah. So I actually did a cornhole set with a bunch of celestial planets and stuff like that. I do statues, masks. I did a Borderlands psycho mask. I'll dabble in other things.
It's all brushes and paint, or do you do airbrush?
I've done airbrushing. I'm not a fan of it personally, for miniature wise. And we'll get into that further on when I go through the process of because this episode is legitimately, I'm going to break this down as simply and as quickly as possible for the step-by-steps, because we'll say it's like 8 or 9 steps for how to paint a miniature and models in general.
So if we're going to talk about miniature painting, which is okay. So if I am a hobbyist, if I am new to this, so I have here male elf magus, magic user, and these are some of those minis that I have bought at my friendly local game store for $5 for a pair.
Yes.
Okay, so these come primed.
Yes.
They're unpainted.
Yes.
What should be in my toolkit, and how much is that going to cost me?
That's a great question.
To start, just to start.
Yes. Just for starters.
So I'm not worried about shading. I'm not worried about lights.
Honestly, no. If we're doing basic, so the best way I would break that honestly down, is in your starter kit. I would probably still have a hold on, sorry, just something happened. It said I was signed out. Weird. It's still going. If I were starting out, I would have, at minimum, I probably would have a couple different brushes, types of brushes you can get off of Amazon or at your FLGS. And they'll probably lead you down a decent route. I'm trying to think if there's a company that you can get that they're really good at my friendly sells. I think it's like Citadel. It's not Citadel, but it's somewhere on those lines.
Okay.
You get your brushes, and you get a starter. You look at whatever your miniature is. You say,
Uh-huh.
okay, what colors do I want this to look like? So, case in point, uh your your elf that you have.
Okay.
You determine what your elf is going to look like in your head, and you pick out some base colors. So you do it simple: red, green, black, brown, and will iron, silver for the weapons if there are any.
Right. Okay.
All right. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure you clean that miniature because it has been collecting dust. Even
Right.
inside that box, there is dust particles on there. So you want to give it a nice wash in just warm soapy water. Let it dry off in a clean, clear spot. Then you're going to, on those ones specific, they don't really have too many mold lines. But if they do, just taking like a little bit of sandpaper. If
Mhm.
not, it's not something you really have to do. But for like those miniatures are, since they're made out of like they're rubber molds, they really typically don't have mold lines.
Right.
Um, and those actually come pre-primed. I
Yes.
still personally like to prime them, and
Okay.
then I like to glue them to their bases. Uh, what you're really going to need. So before we get too many into those steps, your question was what should you have, and how much you're going to need. So basically, picking what colors you want, your basic colors. So like I said, red, green, black, brown, and silver. So you have your 5 colors. You have a couple different paintbrushes, a cup of some sort for water. And if you are drinking a liquid, make sure you have a different cup, because
Right.
I have been a victim of drinking my own paint water. And
That's
pretty
awesome.
much, yeah, pretty much every painter has done that. I have cups that say not coffee on them. Just so I know not to drink that. Like, oh, that one's not coffee. Your grand total budget is probably going to be around 30-40 bucks.
So
For different
and
colors of
that's
paints.
from a hobby store, right?
From a hobby store, you're looking at paintbrushes, you're looking at your paints. I like to have a wash, which is a very watered down paint. You can do
Okay.
it yourself, so add an additional black, and then you just have to do that ratio. It's a real pain in the butt, and you kind of got to have like a wet palette, or like something that you can put it in, like a paper plate, and making sure you're adding water, droplets of water to black paint to water it down. I'm lazy. I just buy the paint because it's less of a headache. And then any dry brush colors that you would want to do. So you're probably looking paints. Let's say they're $3 a pop for a thing. You're probably looking about $25 worth in paint, which you're like, oh wow, that's not bad, but you're really only getting like 6 little pots that are about the size of your thumb.
So but that's not the same paint that you would the tester's paint that you get for models, or is it the same thing?
So they're all those kind of those paints. So those are acrylic based paints.
Okay.
So what you're looking at really right there is like testers, what's some other ones? Vallejo, Citadel, P3. I'm trying to think of some other companies. There's a ton of them out there.
Okay.
Reaper is another one. They all have various kinds of paints, and now they come in like pot shape. They come in little eyedropper looking shapes. Some of them have little lead sinkers in them to help mix them. Some don't. They're all those paints really. They're all going to cost about the same. There are some that are more expensive, like your two-tone paints.
Okay.
But that's a different beast itself.
So, but would if you needed to, if you didn't have a hobby store close by, is that something that Walmart or Michaels or AC Moore or that kind of store would have?
Michaels does.
Okay.
And if you really don't want to go to Michaels, or if you want to get a look at Amazon, does have them. I cringe saying that a little bit because, like I said, I like to try as much as possible support
Sure.
local.
Right.
Yeah, you can find these. You can get gift sets online pretty much everywhere. Like
Okay.
I think Testers has a huge. All the companies do. They have like big sets, like gift sets, starter sets. Even Games Workshop with their Citadel paints. So they'll even come with a few miniatures, all the paint scheme
Okay.
for that paint style, and paint brushes. I think it's like a $45 set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, these miniatures are just the regular scale. So these are what? These are 1.5 inches tall. So that's what, 35 millimeters tall?
28 millimeters tall.
28 millimeters. Okay.
Yes.
So for something like this that
Mhm.
you would paint. Now, I know that young people who have good eyesight don't need this, but would you recommend getting one of those big, you know that magnifying glass that sits on your grandma's
Yes.
next to
I
her
don't
couch?
use it. Yes, but yes, I
With
know
it,
tons of people that use it. Yeah.
it has the ring light and the magnifying glass.
Yeah.
Is that something that if I was gonna be painting an army,
Uh-huh.
is that worth $50 or whatever those costs to buy?
I put this to the same thing where you said about your golf clubs, like buying golf clubs. Is it does it have, or what's the name of that Netflix show? The Asian lady who's talking about like decluttering your house.
The Marie Kondo. Yeah.
Yes. Does it bring you happiness? Does it bring you
Right.
joy?
Right.
That's would not bring me joy, because
Okay.
it would mess with my OCD, because I would look at that and go, okay, I can tell those eyes are off just by like minuscule
Okay.
millimeters. However, I know people that do use it and I don't judge based on that.
Right.
And some people are really, really good. Some people, I kid you not, I have a friend who can put a 5 o'clock shadow on a miniature's head that is the size of your pinky nail. And it blows my eye. And there's literally little individual stubbles. And I can't figure out how he did it. I don't want to, because then I'm going to want to try to do it, and I'm going to realize I can't, and then I'm just going to self-hate myself for like a good solid 2 weeks.
It's a single strand off a paintbrush, not the whole brush.
Yeah, it is a horse hair is what he's using. A horse hair.
Now, did you just pick this up, or do you have formal training, or did you take art
No.
classes in high school, or how did you get to this point?
So honestly, this is like one of the saddest stories in the entire world. It really, really is. It really is. But it's also a positive. So I've mentioned a few times on here my first wife, and I've said that a few times.
Right.
My first wife actually, back in 2014, previous actually in 2013 to 2014, had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I don't know if anybody has ever really dealt with that, but cancer is one of those things. If you don't have it, you don't know how to deal with it. And because when somebody has like a thing going on with them, you try to help them out. Like, this was my wife, and I wanted to help her out, and I wanted to make her better. And there was nothing I could do about it because it was cancer. I could be there supportively, and I was, but it ate me up inside that I couldn't protect her. And I was in the Navy at the time. So my job was to serve and protect this country, and I couldn't protect the ones that I loved. And that broke me down inside a lot, to the point that I just didn't know what to do with my life. And I actually had been hanging out with some guys over at our game store in London and playing HeroClix and stuff. And I just couldn't get into it. I was down about it. And this great gentleman named Joe Peabody came up to me. He's like, dude, you just chill. He's like, paint some minis. So these guys told me to like paint some minis. I'm like, these are dumb. They threw me some paints, they threw me some models and paintbrushes and said, de-stress yourself. Go do this. And I'm like, nah, this is dumb. And I sat down and I started painting these models, and it took so much focus. Now, my models sucked. They were horrible. They just looked absolutely atrocious. But there was so much focus into these models that I felt this stress relief off of me. I was able to just zen out, and it helped me a lot. And then I started doing it more. Like, I was like, okay, I need more models. So I would go buy secondhand decrepit models and just paint them. And eventually over time, I got better, to the point where people were like, hey, that's really cool. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Let me paint your models for you. Just let me paint them. And I started doing that. Unfortunately, my wife ended up passing away from the breast cancer. And I used that. I kept it going with the painting. And it was because it was really hard. It was me and my little dude. Ethan it was just us. And so this was something that helped bond us too. We kind of did nerdy stuff together, did Doctor Who and doing these things. And he would pick out the models and I would paint them. And I just got good enough and started painting them. And then guys were like, paint them for me, had them start paying for my paints to cover that. And eventually, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago, I got good enough to where I felt like I could be to do it as a side job. And I started doing it, started painting them, selling them in the stores, and started taking on commissions. And to where I actually started winning championships and going and doing contests and winning them. However, I got burnt out. And so now I just kind of do it as a casual thing, because you can only paint a model so many times. Like I think at one time I painted 90 termagants, which are these little, like, really nasty little monsters. I painted 90 of them in a row. And let me tell you what, that that was a burnout. However, I love doing it. And that's why when you were like, hey, would you paint some models for me? I'm like, heck yeah, let's do this. So I had an absolute blast doing it.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I wonder if, for someone starting out,
yeah,
you always want to do a good job, right? Yeah. But I think a lot of people expect to start out here.
Oh, and you never will.
And the fact of the matter is, most people, when they're pursuing any kind of art, a lot of their first work stinks, is objectively bad. And then it gets better. Is practice the only way to learn those skills? Is it repetition? I know you say you painted 90 of these things. Is there some value?
Is there muscle memory? Yeah, there absolutely is muscle memory. But going back to your first statement, before I answer that question, the best advice I ever heard was actually from Dave Grohl. And he said, basically how Nirvana got started is a bunch of guys got together, picked up instruments, and they sucked playing them, but they sucked together. And eventually they got good. And the best advice he can give you is go do whatever you want, as long as you're passionate about it, and suck. Eventually you'll get better at it.
Right. Well, and because he's a self-trained musician.
He is. And he plays a billion different instruments.
Right. And if you listen to him talk, he will tell you that he can't read music.
I did not know that.
He says he does not read music, and that when he sits down to write a song, he just plays notes and he puts the song together, and he doesn't have formal training. And so that's what I'm wondering, because I
does formal training help? Absolutely. I will always say, because but does it also limit you? No. I don't know. No. Does formal training help? Yes. Does it limit you? Probably not. Honestly, the way I look, because I compare to, I have a great friend named Kwame who has an amazing company called My Apocalyptic Playground, and his painting style and my painting style are completely different. He prefers airbrushing miniatures. I absolutely detest painting airbrushing miniatures. I think it's just not my cup of tea. Right. That you have to find, if you are interested in painting, you have to find what fits best for you. You have to find your style. You have to find your flavor. I prefer natural colors when it comes to painting miniatures. I don't like doing crazy abstract colors and randos. Every once in a while, I'll do something weird and goofy. Like I painted this horrific monster creature called a Swarm Lord with the Barney theme colors, and I even did his base as like the concrete like schoolyard, and I have like suns and like various like stupid kid drawings, and like what's that game where you hopscotch on it and everything. So but you really have to find your style and what works best for you. I recommend always looking at YouTube videos, and we're going to be putting I'm going to start putting a bunch of them up on our Patreon. so that people can go look at them. But there's tons of stuff out there. Listen to the experts, repetition, rinse and repeat, trying. Feel what you think looks best for what you want, and then get a bunch of cheapo models and just practice. Really.
So did you start with Warhammer models? Is that what you started with?
I started technically, yes, I started with Warhammer models. I started with the Chaos Space Marines that came with a starter set. And then I went to War Machine Hordes, and then I just whatever I could find, D&D, Pathfinder, Reaper, you name it, I did it.
Would you recommend starting with bigger models and working down to something smaller? So you might start with a tank, or you might start with like a World War II, like the 148 size vehicles.
That's a really great question. I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly, no, you know what I would probably do? It honestly, because it helps the focus. If you're wanting to paint miniatures, look at whatever interests you personally. And that's really what the best answer is for all these questions, because, and I know it's a vague answer,
right,
is the whatever tickles your fancy. Me, it's always been I've always been that guy that was into dinosaurs, and I've been in, like, Godzilla was my thing.
Sure.
And so, you know, I like monsters. I like big scary things with teeth. And so, like, Tyranids in Warhammer 40K, Zergs in StarCraft, those have always been like my cup of tea. So I went with what interested me, and then I started expanding from there. Even when I played or was doing War Machine Hordes, I picked Legion of Everblight, which basically like necro dragons. So, like, with just like angelic names.
Okay.
So that's really what made me happy, and that's what I focused on. So if you're wanting to an area to start with what makes you happy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what's so the miniatures that you buy at the store, right? You talked about some of the. It seems like a lot of them are resin cast or plastic injection molded, and then, you know, the old miniatures, the old school D&D miniatures, they were all
pewter and white metal. Yeah.
Right. And because I had some old miniatures. I don't know what's happened to them, you know, but the pewter ones, they would bend, and everybody broke a sword off. Everybody had that one ninja with, you know, with the katana handle, and then, you know, no blade. So what's the easiest of those to paint? I mean, are these, you know, we talked about that, you know, they come pre-primed.
Yeah.
Is this a good entry point? Because these, you know, you can get these at a game store for $5 or $8 for two.
Yeah, for honestly, I'm going to say those, bar none. Reason being is because unless you can get a box of rando models for dirt cheap, like I'm talking, like, you get for $20, you're getting like 30, 40 models for like secondhand, or you get them gift. Those are the best ones to do because they are very cheap. They're not overly tiny, but they are small enough to where, and there's lots of little details on them that you can focus on to help you.
And like the Reaper models, you know, the Reaper ones that you buy. I
actually have that exact model.
You know, because these are.
Is that one plastic?
I think so. And qualitatively, it's not as good.
Yeah.
But it was also $1.99 instead of $5. So on some level, you get what you pay for, right?
Okay. I have her in white metal.
All right.
It's so funny. Where's he at? I know I'm stepping away from my mic a lot. That's totally unprofessional of me.
That's all right.
My podcast, I'll do what I want. Where's she at? Yeah, right here.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome.
That's so funny.
Okay. So I go to the store and I buy the miniatures that I want to buy, or at least I want to practice on. And then I buy my $30 worth of material. Yeah, and like you said, the first ones are probably not going to be very good, right? That
Yeah.
the paint's going to the detail is not going to be there. You're going to have vast swaths of reds and blues mixing up with each other, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just a matter of practice, practice, practice. Is that right?
Essentially, yeah, it really is. I mean, so when you're breaking it down the process of it, you want to make sure you clean your models, move any mold lines if you can. Even though those still have a primer on them, I like to apply my own primer. I will tell you this: try to stick with spray paint that is either made by the company
Right.
that makes your paint, or find one that works with it. Because if you use something, paints
Yes.
can and will
Yes.
have a counter reaction to each other, and sometimes they'll peel models. And certain companies will recommend certain types of paints, which is kind of frustrating. There's a company out there called Creature Caster. The way they make their models, whatever they put into them, certain paints don't stick and they will peel. I like using black because it's very forgiving.
Okay.
A flat black, I can, if I miss something, if I can't get to an area, because models have various poses and it makes it difficult to get in areas without breaking the model. And I know people who do and then reseal it just so they can get that area. I like black, and it just makes it easy. If you miss something, you go, it's shadow. It's an area, they're not really going to focus anyways. Then I like to paint it, and I like to attach it to its base and paint it. I know people who like to paint it, then attach it to its base.
Okay.
I am a strong believer in adding detail to the base. Reason being, it brings so much more life to that model.
Mm-hmm.
If I feel like if you wanted a model that is just painted in a black plain base, you might as well just get a pre-painted model, because it's not giving you as much of a story to your character. And then that's one of those things you do when you're building. You go, okay, so you have that was she a blade singer or something of that sort?
The thief or whatever.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll say she's a thief. So you have that thief. Give her a little bit of a backstory. Is she, she's urban, I'm assuming. So why not do some rocky craggy, or maybe she's in a tavern, or she is in the sewers. You can add those kind of details, and it's not that hard. A little bit of sand, a little bit of glue, and then some paint, just putting paint on it. It adds so much detail, and it's so simple to do that it makes that whole oomph to your model. Just decide on your color scheme, base coat it, pick your primary colors, do your washes, and do your dry brushes. And so a wash is like the very watered down, a dry brush is the counter of it. It's getting as little paint on your brush as possible and gently just swaying back and forth and just getting the edges. Finding a color that's like very close to it. So like your let's say you want a red cape, right? Your guy that has a red cape. Mm-hmm. If you look on him, his edge colors are actually an orange. So it's similar, but it's just enough off that it actually brings out that little edges and those minor details to it.
Okay. Now, do you do a clear coat at the end? Do you finish with a clear coat, or
I don't?
Okay.
I know people who do. Here's some of them I used to. The problem with it is, if the model is not the same temperature as the clear coat, you're going to get this fuzzy, foggy, frosty look. If and then clear coats come in either matte or they come in gloss. If you do gloss, they're going to look super shiny. If you do matte, you're going to take away from the model's detail. So I used to, but I would end up more frustrated afterwards, because I'd have to go in and retouch and redo stuff, to the point where it just goes, it is what it is, what it is, what it is.
Okay, so once I bring all my things to the house, right, or wherever it is I'm going to work.
Yes.
I set up an area
Mhm.
where I'm going to paint.
Yeah.
What do I need in that area? And what is important? I mean, do you want to do it indoors, outdoors, ventilation, humidity? What are the things that go into that?
So priming your models, you definitely want to have ventilation
Okay.
because it's not good or healthy for you to be breathing in spray paint.
Never is.
Don't recommend it. Um, the next, to answer the next part, is wherever you are doing your painting, you have to make sure your paints are room temperature to wherever you're doing it. If you're doing it outside, go ahead, do it outside. I've done it before. It's actually, I do it in the summer. I'll do painting out on the deck. I'll paint models while my wife plays with the kids, so I get to see there, be part of the family, and I can also do stuff.
So
yeah.
room temperature, what's 75 or higher?
Honestly, whatever, legitimately, wherever you need to let your paints adjust to wherever you are going to paint.
Okay.
So that's why when I say room temp, I mean where your studio you are painting is. Now, I will definitely say no, don't paint models in 98-degree weather because it's going to affect them. But you can use that common sense. However, if let's say, okay, you are in your basement right now.
Right.
All right. So you're in your basement, you want to paint your models. You bought your paints, you just bought them from your local gaming store. Sit your paints down in the bag for an hour or two in your room, or
Okay.
an hour before you decide to paint in that room. It's going to be able to help those paints adjust to that temperature. And people go, why do you need to let it adjust? You have to let it adjust because if you don't, you're going to get bubbles.
Okay.
Because their humidity, condensation, impurities in the paints and in the models can affect that, dust, you name it.
Right. Well, environmental stuff also has to do with housework. I mean,
True.
if you're putting flooring down, you want to have that flooring overnight in your house. You don't just want to bring it right off the truck and just start putting it down on the floor.
That's true. Yeah.
Or it's gonna warp. Okay, so the same thing with the paint. It's
yes.
So you want the model and the paint to be the same temperature.
You want them to be equal, same temperature. Yes.
Now, do you want when you paint outside on your, whether it's on your back deck or wherever, do you stay out of direct sunlight? Is that
typically do? I will say yes, it probably is. The reason being, no, I won't actually just say, I will definitely say it is, because I've had the error of doing that, and it dries the paint really, really quick.
Okay.
Which in some cases you're like, oh, that's cool, that's great. In others, it's not so much when you're trying to do details and you're trying to even out that paint, because what happens is you get that congealing is the best way to put it, and then you have to try to brush it off, and then you have this silhouette of where the actual paint was. Yes, I would probably stay out of direct sunlight in that case.
Okay.
Yeah. I like trying to paint outside. It usually ends up poorly. So I'm usually doing very casual stuff when I'm doing out there. If I'm doing, like, case in point, your stuff, I'm doing that downstairs. Typically I'm listening to music that goes along to the theme of whatever I'm painting, just to help me get into. So case in point, when I was painting your guys, I was listening to the soundtrack of the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Okay.
Just because to get that fantasy theme ideology with it. Okay. And then once you start getting more, like, you get that rinse and repeat in, you can start doing more advanced things, it's called OSL, object source lighting.
Okay, right.
So what object source lighting is you have an object that emits some type of light, and what you do is you look at where that light's coming from, and then you go, what would this touch, and what would it look like on that touch? So some people really don't like doing it, some people do. I go back and forth. It depends on the model, depends on what I'm feeling that day.
Right. So just as an example, if I send you a wizard with a fireball in his hand, or one of the ones I had was shooting lightning bolts,
yes,
right? So if it's lightning bolts, it's what you had was you had the lightning bolts were white and blue.
Yep.
And then you had some of that light reflecting on the ground and on the front of the figure,
Yes.
and on the back it was not. So
It was not. Yep.
So
because just literally what I do, well, I don't say I do it with the model, but what I tell people to do is take a flashlight, point it in like what the direction you think this would be coming from, as imagine yourself as the model, and point it at yourself, and you can kind of feel where the light's hitting you. And if you can't, look in a mirror and see where that light's hitting you and go, okay, how can I make this work with my model on that same sort? And eventually you're going to get it. You're going to get that your mind's eye and see where that's going to be with that. And then you're going to know how that light's going to affect it. So if you have a green, you know that you're going to see yellows and green in the model. If you're doing fire, you're going to see yellows and orange and red. With lightning, you're going to see whites and blue. Unless you're doing like yellow lightning, then you're going to see whites and yellow. I just like the blue electricity. I think it looks cooler.
Okay, so you talked about painting armies. How does painting an army different? And Carl did when we talked to him a couple weeks ago. How does that differ from painting individual figures? Is that, do you feel like that's just mass production, or do you, if I come to you and say, hey Steve, I'd like you to paint this army and it's 250 figures.
Yeah.
Are each of those 250 figures going to get the same level of care as the 4 you did for me the other day? Or is it just going to get to the point where you're like, oh, I've got 80 of these pawns and I've got 20 tanks and this, that, and 12 hours in, you're just like, oh my God, here I'm on my 4th beer and
I wish with 12 hours in, I've probably only, depending on how many guys I got, I probably only painted like 6 or 7. So yeah, it averaged for me, and that is a hard question to answer because it depends on your tenacity, your dedication, how much you're getting paid, if you're getting paid to do this, or how dedicated. Now, there's things that Games Workshop does, and a lot of people do. It's called Armies on Parade. Some people will put 18 hours into an individual small little like peon.
Right.
If this is my regular everyday play army, I'm probably putting minimal. I'm doing what's called the 3 color system, which is what is regulation minimum required for miniature gaming.
Okay.
Which is legitimately you need to have 3 different kinds of colors on there. So if I'm doing, let's say I'm doing the Imperial Guard, which is army. Like just think of like the regular army. I'm doing black, I'm doing green, and I'm doing brown. And that is it. And maybe I might add a little bit of silver to their weapons, or like their guns, just to have a little bit of pizzazz to it. Because I'm assembly line the hell out of them. I'm going to do whatever their most major color is. I'm going to prime them that. So in this case, I would probably prime them green instead of black. Then I'm going to go in, add little black specks, and I'm going to add brown specks, and then I'm going to put a little pizzazz on the gun, because that is all I need to get them on the board as regulations. Now, if I'm doing this competitively, I'm trying, hopefully picking a smaller army. But let's say it's you and you're like, hey, I have 250 models. I want them to look like these wizards that you painted for me.
Right.
I'm going to be cursing you in my head a lot. I'm going to be wishing for a slow and painful death for you.
Right.
And then I'm going to sit there and probably put 2-3 hours per figure minimum, which is what I did for your 4 guys. But it was because they were different. They were easy. It wasn't as hard. Honestly, I think for your 4 guys, I think I spent maybe a grand total of like 7 hours, but that's because I was experimenting.
Now, so if for an army commission for something like that, what would that, what would you charge? What
That
should you charge as opposed to what do you charge?
that
Did you
again, that's
charge?
yes.
You know, not,
Me personally versus what again, that's a tough question. That's the problem with a lot of when it comes to, and this is art in general,
right,
and like in the service industry in general, it's quality versus quantity versus the artists themselves. What do I
right,
think I'm worth versus what am I actually worth? In in this sense, I would say, so we'll keep using your miniatures and I'll post up pictures with this episode.
okay,
Is your guys right there. I put, I don't want to say I did my topmost with them. So sorry. But
it
I
looks
feel
better
like
than what I would have done.
I I had fun doing them. And so it was, I tried to give them as much detail as I could without over exerting myself.
Right,
And so I would probably, with your figures, would have charged probably $25 per miniature.
okay,
And you're like, okay, 4 miniatures, that's $100. That's awesome. Well,
right,
I spent 7 hours on that. So that means
right,
at minimum, I'm before expenses and everything,
right,
I'm really making $12 an hour
right,
for those 4 models. And then you sit there and go, ooh, that doesn't sound as good. And then you take away what I used in paints. I used on your
right,
4 models probably close to 32 different colors
hmm,
and 5 different paintbrushes. Well, all right, 32 paint pots, let's say they're $3 a pot. You know,
right,
it adds up really, really
right,
quick.
right. Well, understanding also you're not using that entire pot on
No,
four
you're
figures.
not. But
But
it's
but
like
yes,
if
you're
you're
right.
starting off and you're going, hey, you have to have your product of use before you can do something.
Right. Well,
And
with anything in the service industry, especially when for something like this, I mean, your options are good, fast, inexpensive.
mhm,
And as the consumer, I get to pick two,
yep,
right?
yep,
That's how all of that works, whether
yes,
it's your auto mechanic painting miniatures, your guy doing flooring or drywall or whatever, right? Good, fast, or cheap, you only get to pick two. And so do you think a lot of artists are they lowballing themselves? Are they competing with other artists? How
I
does
would
that?
I would say honestly, majority of people probably undersell themselves.
Okay.
There are that, I will say there's definitely that group, and I've seen them that oversell themselves. Um and it's hard to tell somebody that too. Like it, when I do competitions and everything, I look at people's miniatures and I go, okay, here's what I would have done different. Here's and I'm like your friend's daughter, where she's looking and trying to figure out, and or
Mhm.
maybe your wife too, the technique and everything. When
Right.
I look at a model or I look at anything, I can go, okay, here's what paints that I think they used. Here's how I think they did it. This is how I probably would have done it. And what do I like and what do I not like? And I do that with other people's models. And I've seen people who will go then immediately after that competition try to sell that model and get completely upset when they don't get what they think it's worth. No, don't ever undersell yourself, but make sure you're being competitive in a market to where there is a demand for that product. Um,
Right.
just because you painted very, very well 200 military soldiers, right? If there's
Mhm.
no market for 200 military soldiers, there's only a market for 10.
Right.
That's all you're going to sell.
Right. You've got 190 extra.
Yep, pretty much. So divvy it out in that way then.
Okay.
Um, but again, that's the problem. There are painters out there. And the reason, another reason I decided to when I did decide to go professional with it, um, there's not a lot of painters out there.
Okay.
There are, okay, so let me clarify that statement. There are a lot of painters out there, It's just the burnout rate is really high. Uh, they're very spread out, and it's very hard to find that sweet spot ratio with people, because there are companies out there that will paint them and they say, hey, this is what we charge based on size, and here's our speed. And they set up, you get to choose quality. You can choose speed, but it's going to be time as a multiplier to whatever you choose with quality.
Now, let me ask you, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, are some of those countries, are they exploiting child labor in Burma or India?
No,
or China?
that's a surprisingly, not to say surprisingly, but no, it's there are companies, they're actually based out here. Most of them that I've seen are based out in the United States. There are some in Germany, there are some in the UK. I've actually had dealings with them, sat there and talked to them, and even done some collaborations as a freelance painter with them.
Okay.
And it's they set up, and you set up and show your portfolio, and you say, hey, here's what I can do, this is how fast I can do it, this is what my expectations are. And they go, okay, cool, when we set this up, this is what your percentage is of that. Some of them go by the base size of a model. If they go, okay, if it's a Games Workshop based model, it's 32 millimeter base, you charge X based on this multiplier. If it's a 50 millimeter base size model, you charge X. And the reason they do that, and they break it down on that individual level, is because privateer press models, while may have the same size base as a Games Workshop's model, the detail and the quality and the size of the model itself varies.
Okay.
And I made that mistake one time where I charged for a commission, and I was going off of GW sizes, and it was a privateer press, and I royally screwed myself out of probably close to $2,000.
Wow.
And I said, you know what, that's on me. And I did it. But yeah,
So when you're taking, if you were taking a commission, if someone were interested in taking commissions, or commissioning someone to do their work, do you charge, you the artist, do you charge by the hour, or do you charge by the piece, or is your hourly rate figured into
all of that? All that is actually, and you find that, and I'm sure that Unnatural 20 will say the same thing. They would tell you it's all based on all of those things. Because when you look at it, you go, okay, I have this model, it's this size, it has an immense amount of detail in it. There's actually prime example. I love using GW stuff because they have like either no detail, like minimal detail, or they have a stupid amount of detail.
Right.
And one of the guys is a Primarch called Roboute Gilliman. He is holding a flamey sword. He has the olive leaves Caesar thing going on. He has golden spikes all over him. He has this blue, beautiful armor. He is standing on the corpse of a defeated foe, and there is a torch in the ground with fire coming out of it. And he has all these ribbons and medallions and tapestry all over him. And the guy is about 3 inches big. So he's about the size of this. And he goes, and I had a guy ask me, he goes, how much would you charge for that? And I looked at him and I said, you want it? And I said, what is your quality? He's like, I want above tabletop quality. I want a decent, just not a stupid high quality, but a display. I told him, I said, all right, buddy, I'm going to tell you straight up, it's going to cost you $200 for that one model. And he gasped. He's like, oh my God, why would it be so much? And it's like, the detail in that is stupid.
Okay. All right. So you would, if you were taking a commission, you would look at the figure in advance, and say that this is, as opposed to, just something of lower, just the D&D mini right out of the box, which don't have great detail.
And one other thing I'd take into detail is miniature gamers. Some of those models need to be built. If you don't build them, I have to build them. And that's additional time. that I'd have to add in. But yes, let's say, so in theory, let's say, yes, it is a pre-built, it's already pre-built and you're sending it to me. Yes, I would have to look at it. But I ask those questions. Cool. Is it built? Yes. All right, cool. Or if it's not, no. Do you want me to build it? Well, how much is that going to cost? Well, it's going to cost you time for me building it. It's going to cost you for the glue. So then, and then I had to decide. I asked him, like, all right, there's going to be extra stuff. Do you want that back? Well, no. All right, cool. I will take that out of what I'm going to pay because that's stuff I can reuse. If I am, yes. All right, I take that into the shipping cost because I have to ship back all the stuff that I didn't use.
Right. And because paint's liquid, it weighs more than styrofoam peanuts.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So when I as the consumer am coming to someone to commission a work, okay, so they're looking at the level of detail, they're looking at the artist is looking at the size, the level of detail, the amount, the different colors that I want to have in it, that's going to figure in as for material cost as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then if I want other special effects, again, some of these miniatures, they have the fireballs with them or they have the wings or all that other stuff. But, you added some things to mine.
I did. I did some OSL and I added some, 2 of them I did OSL and all 4 of them I added base details. And yes, those do take into factor because I've asked people, I always ask it, they go, hey, do you want the bases detailed? Well, what does that entail? Well, we can just do one primary color or we can do added diorama photography, I think is what it is. Just diorama display.
So it's in the best interest of both me as the consumer and you as the artist for all of that to be taken care of before you quote me a price.
Absolutely. And if you are as an artist, this is something I always did, and it's nerve-wracking the first couple times you do it, but it's something that I strongly recommend. I always have an upfront cost, which is taken out of the overall commission. Okay. So you have your 4 models. I told you it's $100 to do what you want me to do. Okay. You go, okay, cool. I tell you right up, okay, there will be a 25% upfront cost. Reason being is this is me at minimum going, okay, regardless of how you feel about how I did, it's me at minimum covering my expenses for the items that I used.
Right.
And then I always tell them that is non-refundable. And that's a scary thing to tell people is like, hey, this is non-refundable. Whether or not you like this is non-refundable.
Now, do you have a written contract for this, or do you just do that through private message, or how? If it's for 4 figures, would you even have a contract, or would you decide to send you a PM, or how does that work?
So I honestly, I ended up making a contract saying, hey, here are the things that I am doing, and the reason it just became just to keep the system going and build it, because it is as an artist, it's very daunting and can be you start to feel self-conscious about yourself about what you're going to do, and you're like, oh my god, are they going to freak out and back out if I tell them, hey, this is, but it's to cover you and it's to cover them, and it sets that expectation of, hey, no matter what, this is I am using up somebody's time, and I need to respect that as much as possible. And there are people that were like, I want a full refund, and 90% of them I told no. Others I was like, you know what, I'm going to give it back to you because I don't want to deal with you anymore. And then because I've had that horror experience where I did a model and I sent it out to somebody the entire time. They're like, this looks great, this is perfect. Sent them tons of pictures. They said, that is exactly what I wanted. And they got it there and they go, nope, I don't like it. I want a full refund. I will threaten you on everything that I possibly can. And I was like, hey, you know what? You do you. Guess what, though? It doesn't matter. And then they just kept bothering me. And at that point, I decided it wasn't worth it. Gave them refund, took all those messages, and I informed every artist that I knew that would be a potentiality for them, and say, hey, this is somebody we don't use, because a lot of us artists art, and as an artist, and I will say this, if you decide to do this professionally, join Facebook groups with other artists. They're going to give you tips and tricks, and they're also going to be able to, it's how you build a blacklist where you go, hey, these are people that we don't do commissions for, because either A, they're going to try to threaten you to do it for free, or B, they have unreasonable expectations.
So how is that? How is so the artist community, at least the one that you're in, is very supportive? Because I know that there are some environments where, I have some friends who are in bands, right? And garage bands, and they play clubs. They they might be locally famous, and some of them in some scenes, it's very competitive, and it seems like everybody's at each other's throats. And in other locations, every band is going to see every other band play at every chance that they get, and they're all buying each other shirts and merchandise and all that other stuff. Is that how the model painting, the model artist community is?
I would like to say it is. It's probably is exactly like every other. Case in point, your bands. However, I think because we're far and few on the commission based side, I had a healthy competition with my good friend Kwame. Again, like he said, he chose airspray painting, I did not. But even though technically we were competitors, we never let it get between us. What we did is we did set up turfs, which is if you have a bunch of artists in your local area, sit down and talk to them and go, okay, hey, I don't want to be stepping on anybody's toes. However, if it is a toxic area, you have two choices. Either A, you back down and you don't do in that area, or you say, you know what, I have no feels for them, I'm just going to do my thing. And sometimes you may have to be that way. But him and I
if there's more demand than there are artists, and nobody's starving for work, I would imagine that that's a lot
like I said,
competitive.
It actually shocked me here in Connecticut how high of a demand there were for commission artists. And how little commissioners there were. Whereas in Indiana, I couldn't get a commission to save my life. It was there just wasn't that demand for it. So yeah, and that is again another factor. So yes, maybe it was because we all eat here, and so it was never an issue. However, like I said, we had set up turfs and said, hey, this is where I like to sell my stuff. Where do you want to sell your stuff? They said here, and I said, okay, cool. We'll try not to step in each other's toes. If we do want to sell there, just talk to each other. I'm like, hey, I got some extra stuff. Do you mind if I throw it over there? And vice versa. It was very, very pleasant.
Well, good.
But like I said, I've seen both sides of it. I will say this though, definitely get your feet wet. Try, show off your stuff. And when you think you're ready to be a commission artist, have people look at it. Like you'll know, I feel like you'll know when people's like, oh, that's really good. Would you do this for me? When you start hearing phrases like that, then you know you're ready to start doing, you're stepping in the right waters for commissions.
Right. Or when you just take the pre-painted D&D miniature and you put it on the desk, and when you think, oh, my figure looks better than that one, that's when you know you're ready to sell, right?
It's funny you say that because I actually have models from like the D&D stuff, and I looked at it and I go, oh, I can do a better job than this. And I did. There's a Cerebrolith. It's this demonic psychic demon.
Right.
Which I know I said demonic. It's a psychic demon. And I looked at it and I go, because I really wanted the model. And I was like, all right. And I got it. And I'm like, oh, that paint job sucks. I'm like, I'm going to do better. Or I got a Mimic dice box from Amazon, and I was like, oh, that looks really great. And I got it and I go,
Oh,
That's terrible. Who painted this?
no.
Like, who did this? This is terrible. And it was, and I don't want to say who it was. It wasn't unnatural 20 art by any
Right.
chance, but they were like, they had business cards and they're like, hey, thank you for buying our thing. What do you think? And I'm like, you suck. Like, it's terrible. It's got awful. The teeth look like candy corn. It was yellow and with like a little bit of orange and then white. It wasn't blended at all. The back was just horribly brush of black and orange and red, and the eyeball was just, it was all, it was almost assembly line done, which was very disappointing because it was a resin print or resin mold done, and did look, the case itself absolutely gorgeous, the outside great,
Right.
but the inside I'm like caca, and I'm like, I can do this. Like, I got it. My wife Jackie was looking at me, she goes, you don't look happy. I'm like, I'm not. And she's like, what are you gonna do? I said, I'm going downstairs. And she's like, what? And repainting it? And I'm like, yeah. Like right now? Yeah. You just got, yeah, no, I'm painting it. And by the end of the night, I'm like, that is better. And I'm like, that is something I can be proud of. And that is something I can display. Now people go, wow, that's really cool. Who did that?
Right.
Me.
All right.
Yeah. But honestly, you asked a ton of questions and actually asked all the ones what I was going to ask, like some of the questions that I actually had asked too.
Is there anything I missed?
No. Actually, we skipped over the whole "what have you been up to" part of our show. We were right into the meat and potatoes of this episode.
I haven't been up to anything since the last time we talked.
We didn't get to talk about Halloween though.
Oh, well, that's true.
So let's end it on what have you been up to then. We're doing this reverse. Season 2, we're flipping everything around.
Yeah.
How was your Halloween?
It was okay.
Did you have a lot of trick-or-treaters?
We didn't know, not as many as we usually do. And part of it was because it got cold and it started to rain a little bit. And the other thing was that they don't have trick or treat on Halloween night if Halloween falls on a weekend. Don't ask. So our trick or treat, Halloween was on a Sunday this year.
I want to ask.
It's just the craziest thing. Okay, so Halloween this year was on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So because we're kind of in the Bible Belt of West Virginia, they don't believe in trick or treat on Sunday. Well, the local college, Marshall University, had a football game on Saturday. So you can't have trick or treat on Saturday.
You live in that kind of town? Everything closes for football, college football?
Yes. And then usually there's high school football on Friday. So most of the time there's not trick or treat on Friday. But for whatever reason, the city had trick or treat on Friday. The county had trick or treat on Saturday. Someone else, there was another community nearby that had trick or treat on Thursday. I mean, if you were a kid and you knew where all the trick or treat was, you could have cleaned up. So the neighborhood that I'm in, we live out in the county. I can take one of those water balloon slingshots and I can hit the city line from where I live. But also in our subdivision, if you go down the hill, there are some people that live in the city. And they everybody's like, oh, we want to have trick or treat on Friday. So, okay, fine. We'll have trick or treat on Friday because it was supposed to rain some more on Saturday. But we usually have about 100 to 150 kids. And this year we probably only had about 70.
Besides the craziness in the schedule, do you think because of last year, because of the pandemic, because of COVID, it affected this year for Halloween? I feel like it did in my mind because there was less trick-or-treaters out when I went trick-or-treating.
Okay.
But we made out like freaking bandits.
Sure. So. Well, I don't know. Last year we had more kids than I thought we were going to have last year.
Okay.
And we had Halloween is like the one night a year that I see some of my neighbors. Because usually we live in a cul-de-sac. We live in a cul-de-sac down at the bottom of the hill.
Mhm.
And a lot of kids don't, a lot of kids will, families will come to our hill to trick or treat because there's one way up the hill. The houses are reasonably close together and there's not any through traffic. So you don't have to worry about your kids getting run over by cars, right?
Yeah.
On Halloween night. So from 6 to 8 p.m. on our street and in our neighborhood, they can, just run, kids can run wild. So usually what we do is we set up at a house up the cul-de-sac right before it starts. And we set up a bunch of tables and everybody puts their bowls out. Last year we had a tree that I bought at Big Lots that makes noise and moves and is spooky and all that other stuff. And we just set up our bowls and kids come down and they take candy out of each bowl. And then I've got a fog machine and this year we had skeletons climbing the house. I don't feel like there were fewer kids this year because of COVID. I think there were definitely fewer kids last year. But I thought it was about the same. Now,
Okay.
my Halloween was also a little bit more down than normal because on Thursday, I went and got my Moderna booster shot.
How are you feeling?
Well, the first 24 hours were fine. My arm hurt a little bit where they gave me the shot. Well, then Friday night, trick or treat night, at about 4 o'clock, I started to get a headache and started to run a fever. So I wasn't feeling very well through most of trick or treat. And overnight, I was having some fever and chills. And I woke up and I went to work on Saturday. I worked overtime on Saturday. I came home, took a nap, and then after that, I was fine.
Nice.
So 48 hours after the booster, everything's great. But that was my Halloween. But I wore my X-Wing pilot to work, even though there was basically no one at work to see me. Although there were like I work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and we have people from the public that do come into our building. And I walked out and I got a couple of strange looks from people who didn't know what the deal was. But everybody in the building knows that oh, it's Halloween. What's Perry dressed up as this year? So anyway, so that was my Halloween. And then
nice.
And then, we don't have kids at home, so I don't have to worry about trick or treat. I don't have to worry about taking kids out or bringing them in or, searching their candy for edibles or any of those
love that
fear-mongering things.
I love how you said worry about that, because to me, it is my favorite thing to do is go out there. Like I am that guy. And even like my Halloween experience was absolutely hilarious because one night we did, I can't remember what night it was, but we did something for the Cub Scouts. Oh, Friday night we did something for the Cub Scouts.
Okay.
And so they did this one of the guys, he went all out. He had a walking trail and everything.
That's awesome.
Dude, it was so cool. Like his whole house, he had like he had a pirate ship. He had a whole pirate ship. And I'm like, and this is how I know I'm a dad and I'm an adult, because I see all these like projectors up, I see all these lights, I see a pirate ship, there's a trail, there's fog machines, and I'm talking like 6 or 7 of everything I'm talking about here. And the only thing that was going through my head was, wow, what's his electric bill? And never once as a kid would I have ever thought of that. I would have been like, this is freaking great. And like the guy next to me goes, how much extension cable do you think he has? And I'm like, oh my God, we're adults, aren't we? Now,
I hope those are LEDs that use less power.
Right? That's how I know I'm an adult.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
However, I was one of the only adults to dress up, and I did wear my Viper Yanti mask and my whole outfit. And because I couldn't explain to anybody who's not a nerd what a Yanti is, I just get them like, oh, I'm a lizard man, I'm a snake man. Like, I'm just like, let's just keep it simple.
Yes.
Which was, I got so many looks. Everybody loved it.
Good.
Then I went to Halloween night. Halloween, we went to my in-laws' house, and they're like, "Hey, all the kids come dressed up. We'll do a little quick Halloween thing here, and then we'll go." And I asked my wife, I go, "Are we dressing up?" And she goes, "No, it's just for the kids." Oh, okay. And my mother-in-law heard me, and she goes, "Do you want to dress up, Stephen?" Well, since you asked, yeah, I kind of do. So I was like 10, 15 adults and 5 kids. There's me and the 5 kids all dressed up. And I'm like, look at me.
You dress up every year at
I
Halloween.
will. Everybody knows it's my holiday. Everybody
Yes.
knows like this is my holiday, and no, there's like zero judgment. But everybody looked and they go, "Oh my god, that's awesome!"
Right.
And then everybody got mad at my wife for not dressing up because they're like, "Steve's dressed up. Why aren't you dressed up, Jackie?" And she's like, "I didn't know I was supposed to dress up." And they're like, "Family event. The family dresses up. You dress up. That's a rule." And she wasn't amused by that.
Well, you need to tell your in-laws that they all need to dress up.
That's what I told them. Actually, I'll get to that in a sec. So then we went and did trick or treating. So the family, we all went together. We did the cul-de-sac at 5:30.
Right.
So that's when trick or treating started, and then from 5:30 to 7:30, little dude and I were pretty much on our own.
Okay.
And we made so much. We ended up filling up probably 4 or 5 bags worth just between the two of us worth in candy. And like, I didn't go out of my way to like, hey, trick or treat. But if like, they're like, hey, does dad want some candy? Well, dad's not going to say no. So here we go. Put it in there. Dad's wearing a costume. That's really cool. And that's what everybody kept looking at it and going, oh my God, that's so creepy. And then I'd be like, I'd say something and they'd see the face move.
That's awesome.
I cannot emphasize the quality in this mask. I didn't feel hot, but my skin couldn't breathe. And so this was the deciding factor what made me stop trick-or-treating that night. Not because we were really tired, but because I could feel and hear the sweat from the mask bubbling on my face. Like it would just feel the bubble ripple up, like it was just building up pressure and bubbling down my face. But the deciding factor is when I started getting large amounts of sweat in my ear. Like it was like, when you get water ear and everything.
Yep.
I've never had that sensation before. And so I was like, Ethan, we need to go home. I can't hear now. I have water in my ear. So we go home and I take off the tunic and I take off my shirt and I pull up the mask and it just literally like somebody just dropped a water balloon on my head. It was so wow. And they both just look at me like, what? Why are you wet, Dad? I'm like, that's sweat. Dad's gonna go shower.
No kidding.
But it was great. Tons of people taking pictures, had a great time. Absolutely loved it. We made out like bandits. We got potato chips, we got like bags of chips. Daddy got a beer, which was really great. I got a dude gave me a craft beer. He goes, adult treat, and I'm like, can I get it with a straw? Because it's really hard to drink out of this mask. So I'm sitting there drinking a beer, and wife's like, what do you got? Got me a beer.
Yep. Well, that's the other thing that we do at our table. We're all the neighbors, we sit out. Like I said, sometimes it's the only conversation I have with them in any given year. And usually one of the neighbors, his contribution is a bag of candy and 2 bottles of wine. And then my wife, she usually makes her apple juice and Red Hots in a crock pot. And then if you ask nicely, she'll give you some cider. And if you ask extra nicely, she'll put some Fireball or some other liquor in the thing. So that's what the adults get for bringing their kids around.
Yeah, I didn't get my mulled wine this year. So there is somebody that down the road that does do mulled wine, and I didn't get it this year. So getting a craft beer was a definite solid. Okay. However, I kid you not, we probably walked like 4 or 5 miles worth of like houses and everything because we were going back and totally worth it. And then afterwards when we got home and people were still trick or treating until like 8:30 around our neighborhood. And then the family started FaceTiming me because they wanted to see the mask on. Right. And so I'm sitting there on my wife's phone. She's very much annoyed. I'm talking to her family and they're like, oh my God, we really need to do a family, like just dress up. And I'm like, yeah, cosplaying is a blast. And it's, right. That's what I'm saying. I love being this nerdy. At least at minimum, I am an influencer for my family and my friends because the amount of people I've got interested into D&D. My brother-in-law is coming back for another game of D&D. The Monsters and Mailman, I've got 5 people for them. So I've got grand total of 6 new players for D&D. I have an entire family, like my wife's family. They're competing with the Catholics and the Rabbits. I kid you not.
Right.
I either at minimum they're their own cult, at max they might be their own religion. So she because she has like 12 uncles and aunts just on her mom's side. It's ridiculous. And there's so many of them that they're like, oh yeah, we'll have to do all this now. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm also convincing them all to do a Cousin's Day family or Squid Games game.
Okay.
So we'll do all the games from like Squid Games or some version of them. But instead of, murdering each other, because, that's kind of like illegal, we're going to do shots.
Okay.
So I'm like, I'm looking forward to this too. But it's cool and it's exciting, and it was fun to see everybody's reactions to the mask. That if I don't have to do anything to sell it, because I would tell them, like, they're like, how much does that mask cost? I'm like, $600. And they're like, oh my god. And I'm like, yeah, but I can do this and this and this. And I'm like opening my mouth and all this stuff, and they're like, oh my god. I'm like, I can wear this, I can go to competitions, I can go to like the local bars and do this stuff, and I know it's going to be awesome. And I did Little Dude's makeup up, and I've got some really good photos. I'm going to edit them a little bit. This kid you would be so proud of him, David. He did some cosplay poses that I was so impressed. I'm like, Jackie, did you tell him to do that? And she goes, no, he just did that himself. I'm like, he had that natural talent to sit there and pose that way.
Right.
Like he's sitting on the stairs.
I don't know that this natural talent. So a lot of those kids practice now.
I think so. Yeah. Right. Like
the practicing for Instagram and TikTok.
Considering he doesn't have access to those, which is I'm proud to say, as a parent, he doesn't have access to that.
He's looking in the mirror.
He probably, like, he sat there and he posed, and I'll send you the pic, and I'm going to edit it up and make him look all like, because he's a warlock, and
that's awesome.
I'm proud of him. I'm stupid proud of this kid. He is such a nerd. Good. I'm so proud of his nerdydom. But you know what? One last thing, Boba Fett, Book of Boba. We got to see a trailer for that. Awesome.
I did.
Morbius, got to see a trailer for that.
Okay.
I'll see it. I'm excited because Morbius is one of my dudes. We got a bunch of new trailers for the Eternals. To the point where I'm like, I stopped watching because I don't want to see it anymore, because I feel like it's going to ruin the movie.
I can understand that.
But other than that, it's getting exciting. Next couple months are going to be very enthusiastic. And last
Hawkeye.
Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot about Hawkeye too. Which is also exciting. These are all things we were going to talk about, but you know what? Hey, this is Stas with Nerdy Ambitions. We turn tangents into everything.
Yep.
I'm cool with it. But I want to, before we wrap this up, I want to announce, I did it on Twitter, I did it on Facebook. I'm going to keep doing it everywhere, because this is a big deal, and I'm very excited that we get to have him on board. We get to have the amazing, the impeccable, the one of the gurus of horror RPG, Sandy Peterson, on the show. And so this is your guys' chance. If you guys want to ask him a question, we're going to be picking out some random questions from our listeners and viewers to ask him. And so he's going to sit down with us on November 17th and talk to us about everything that is Peterson Games, and a little bit of his history and his life and how he got into this. So very, very exciting.
Yes,
stupid definitely. Excited for this. Like, trying hard not to fanboy over here. Legitimately to the point where I'm thinking about actually in my background hiding all the stuff that I have, because I don't want to give him like that stalker vibe. Because I do have a lot of his games and stuff, and not why I tried to get him on the show. Like, hey, look at how much I like you. That was more of like their fun stuff. So I was like, oh, I don't want to give off the creeper vibe. I should probably just put up everything like, oh, I don't own anything Peterson Games. So oh, I think I have Call of Cthulhu. I don't know.
Right.
No, very exciting.
I mean, even before the board games. I mean, just if you played video games in the 90s.
Yes.
Civilization, Doom, Quake, Age of Empires. I mean, his name is on all those. On some level. You know, so
all three, the first three, I think, Age of Empires, not mythology though. Well, at least I don't know. I'll have to ask him that one. That'll be a question to ask him. Did he help on mythology?
Sure.
Yeah, there's a question. So very exciting stuff in the future.
Yes,
we are working with others. Oh, Dana's going to be coming back on the podcast. I've set up with him. Yep, we're going to talk more Lego stuff with him, especially around the holidays.
Good.
Tips and tricks for parents and everything, and what to look for Lego enthusiasts. There's a lot of stuff coming up. And we will be recording more D&D, but we'll be wrapping up for the initial campaign, and then just doing the occasional, depending on how the holidays work out, maybe do some seasonal specials, as well as our holiday Harry Potter special that I'm going to try to work in again, because we did a competition last year.
Okay.
But yeah, I got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm excited about it. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Nope, I don't. It's very interesting to hear about you and model painting, because like I said, that art I don't art, and I don't do it well, so I always love to hear about people who are into that sort of thing.
And legitimately, truthfully, these aren't pre-staged questions that we decided like, hey, let's ask this to forget this kind of answer. That was completely natural, and I quite enjoy that. So let's go ahead and let's wrap this up. As always, please like, subscribe, and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are listening to us on Audible or Apple, please remember to rate and review. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, so please like and follow us at DNA Pod, and on Twitter at NerdDNA Pod, and on Twitch at NerdDNA Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Steve Pugh, and joining with me tonight is the wonderful, the amazing, the impeccable David Perry. Thank you again, and good night.
Good night.